Hello, and welcome to our webinar over building a practical BCP for your financial institution. My name is Savannah Richardson, and today we're going to walk through what makes a business continuity plan actually work, not just on paper, but in real life. We'll look at the key pieces of a strong BCP, how to build one that people will actually use, and where most organizations get stuck. Later on, I'll be joined by two fantastic guests, Joseph Ellis from Boost Consulting and Chris Brewer from CoNetrix Technology, who will share what they've learned from both helping others build BCPs and running their own programs behind the scenes. And before we begin, I need to cover a few housekeeping items. Just as a brief disclaimer, this presentation is for information only. This presentation contains our own opinions, and this presentation is proprietary. This session has audio and video feed, so if all you can see is the PowerPoint, well then you'll still get the same great information, just not our faces. At the end of the session, you will give us your feedback and you might just win a $25 Amazon gift card. The slides, recording, and certificate of attendance will be sent to you via email after the session. And finally, please interact with us today. Use the questions panel that you'll see on your screen. There are over 400 people registered, so we'll get to as many questions as we can. And just so you know a little bit more about us, I work with Tandem, an information security and compliance application by CoNetrix. Tandem is a suite of applications all focused around helping businesses create and manage their information security programs. One area we especially like to focus on is helping financial institutions be exam ready, whether that's with risk assessments, policies, vendor management, or anything else. We're here to help you. So enough about us, we'd love to know you. We have a few poll questions during our time today, and we'd love for you to participate, and I know everyone else on the call would too. Learning is best when we can learn from each other. So up first, you should see a poll there on your screen. What type of organization do you currently work for? The answer options here are bank, credit union, other financial institution, third-party service provider, or other. And if you choose that other option, please leave a comment. All right, so we're seeing a few here today. You should be seeing those results here in just a moment. And we're looking at about 57% with banks and 30% with credit unions. So we're going to be looking at a lot of information that is going to cover these areas. And I'm excited. And also the others that are either in other financial institutions or if you're in another category or industry, I really think this information will be really helpful for you. And yeah, I'm excited to get started. I do have another poll question here. And if you can answer this question, you should see that poll question on your screen. And the question is, what is your organization asset size? We have less than 250 million, 250 million between and 500 million, between 500 million and 1 billion, 1 billion to 5 billion, and more than 5 billion. Very interesting. Yeah, we'll leave that open just for a few seconds. Oh, I think it's, yeah. Okay, great. So looking at these options, we do have quite a bit in the between the 1 billion asset size and 5 billion asset size. That's exciting to see. I like I said, I think with the information that we're seeing here on the screen and where our asset sizes are, we're all going to be able to relate to this information. So I'm excited to get started. Okay, so here's the plan for today. We're going to start with the foundations of BCP, then talk about common pitfalls when managing a BCP. Then we'll talk with our two panelists, Joseph Ellis with Boost Consulting and Chris Brewer with CoNetrix Technology. And we'll have a demo of the Tandem Business Continuity Plan product, and then we'll wrap up. Sounds good? All right, let's dive in. So this part of the presentation focuses on the basics of business continuity planning. We'll cover the core concepts here, and then during the panel, we'll take a closer look at some of these topics through real-world experiences. And before we get to the building blocks and foundations of BCP, I'd like to get a quick sense of where everyone stands. And so this comes with another poll question. And the question that you'll see is, what format are you using to manage your BCP? Here you can select all that apply. And our answer options are Word, Excel documents, internal shared drive, specialized software, paper copies, or other. If you're choosing other, please leave a comment. And if you do choose that specialized software, I would like to know what you're using. So please feel free to drop a comment and let us know what software you're using. Wow, yeah. Okay, just leaving this open just a few more seconds. We have about 74, 75% voted. Okay, I think we can share those results. And so so there are quite a few people using Word and Excel documents, and a lot of people, 70%, using the specialized software. I'm really interested to know what software you're using. If it's not Tandem Business Continuity Planning, yeah, please leave a comment and we'd love to know those results. So it's always interesting to see the range of formats out there, whether your BCP lives in a sleek software platform or is still hanging out in a binder from 1990. The important thing is that it works when you need it. Now let's talk about what that actually means. At its core, business continuity planning, or BCP, is how your organization prepares to keep things running during unexpected events, whether it's a cyber attack, a power outage, or someone accidentally microwaving their lunch with tinfoil again. Cue Ryan started the fire for my office fans. But the goal is simple: keep your systems, your processes, and your operations bouncing back fast. Oops. Instead of crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, BCP helps you prepare in advance so when something goes wrong, you already have a plan. Business continuity planning isn't just one thing, it's a collection of connected parts that work together. When we say BCP is a process, we really mean it. A good plan usually includes a few key building blocks. First, you have the business impact analysis. This helps you identify your organization's most critical processes, what they depend on, and what could happen if those processes go down, so you can plan how to recover them effectively. We have risk assessment. This helps you identify potential threats like natural disasters, cyber attacks, or system failures, and evaluate how likely they are and how much damage they could cause, so you can build recovery plans that actually match your risks. Then we have risk management strategies, are where you turn your risk assessment and BIA into a plan for how to keep the business running during a disruption, using tools like checklists, recovery goals, and steps to respond and recover. Training and testing make sure your team knows what to do during a disruption and help you confirm that your plan actually works. And if it doesn't, they show you what needs to be fixed. And ongoing monitoring and updates helps keep your BCP current by updating it as risks, technology, or processes change. And regular reports to leadership ensure everyone stays informed and accountable. At the end of the day, BCP isn't just a document, it's a process. And when it's done well, it helps protect your people, your customers, and your reputation. Now, you're probably wondering how your plan stacks up, and I would like to know too. So let's check in with another poll. Our poll question here is, how confident are you that your BCP would work during a real disruption? So your answer choices are very confident, somewhat confident, not sure, we haven't tested it yet. Yeah, we're leaning into somewhat confident, very confident. We have about 75% voted. I think it's okay to go ahead and close those polls. So yeah, we're seeing about 55% that say somewhat confident, 32% very confident. We have a few others that are saying not confident. And I really hope that while we go through this presentation, this is going to help you become more confident in your BCP. I think it'll kind of show you what areas you may be missing or that you haven't thought about. So let's keep the conversation going. One of the first and most important steps in BCP is figuring out your business processes. Business processes are the major activities that keep your organization running day to day. They're not individual workflows, systems, and equipment. They're the bigger picture. Think of things like human resources, customer services, and IT support. These are the operations that, if interrupted, could have a serious impact on your ability to serve customers or meet your goals. It's important to remember that while systems, equipment, and people all support your processes, they're not the process itself. What you're really doing here is identifying how your work gets done and which parts of that work are essential to keeping your organization going. So in a BCP, we take those processes and figure out which ones are the most critical. That means asking questions like, if this process goes down, what happens? How long can we go without it? What do we need in place to get it back up quickly? Identifying your key business processes helps you focus your recovery efforts where they matter most. It's the first step in building a plan that's not just compliant, but actually useful during a real disruption. Now, once you know which business processes are most important, the next step is figuring out what supports those processes, and that's where systems and equipment dependencies come in. Every process relies on something behind the scenes to keep it running. Think software, hardware, network connections, and third-party vendors, because nothing says surprise disruption like a vendor outage at the worst possible moment. These are your dependencies, and knowing what they are is key to creating a plan that works. So here's a simple way to think about it. If a process is what you're doing, the dependencies are how you're able to do it. For example, if your customer service process relies on a specific CRM system and your CRM system needs internet access, those are both dependencies. If either one goes down, your ability to serve customers is impacted. Managing these dependencies is critical because it helps you figure out the right order for recovery. You'll know which systems need to come back online first and what you'll need to make that happen. This is where a lot of plans fall apart. They forget to connect the dots between the what and the how. The stronger those connections are, the stronger your entire recovery plan will be. Okay. So when something goes wrong, you don't want to be scrambling to figure out what needs to come back online and how fast. That's where recovery objectives come in. They help you set clear expectations for how quickly operations should be restored and how much data you can afford to lose along the way. Now, there's a lot going on in the graphic that you see on the screen, and I'm not going to cover each one of these things or each one of these items. But if you wanted to take a closer look at what this graph is showing or this graphic is showing you, I encourage you to click on the link for the blog that's associated with it. This is where it'll cover each of these sections to kind of help you understand what's going on in the photo. And at the end of the presentation, you will receive these slides so you can have access to that blog. Now, the main things that I want to cover for this area, though, are the three main terms that you would need to know for BCP. First, we have the maximum tolerable downtime. This is the MTD. This is the hard limit. It's the absolute longest a process or system can be down before the damage gets serious, whether that's financial loss, regulatory trouble, or customer fallout. Then we have the recovery time objective, the RTO. This is your goal. It's how quickly you plan to bring that system or process back online. So your RTO should always fit inside your MTD, kind of like making sure your meeting ends before everyone checks out mentally at the 1 hour mark. And then we have the recovery point objective. This is the RPO. This defines how much data you're willing to lose. It's the point in time your backup should cover, so you're not starting from scratch after an outage. Together, these objectives help you focus your recovery efforts where they matter most, and they give leadership and IT a shared playbook to work from when things get stressful. They're most effective when your plan has been tested and practiced ahead of time. Now that brings us to our next question. So we have another poll question for you, and our question here is, how often does your organization test your BCP? Our answer options are at least twice a year, once a year, only after a major update or incident. We have a BCP, but it hasn't been tested yet and not sure. And we're staying around the once a year mark. Stay open a little bit longer. Okay, we're about 74%, so we'll go ahead and we can close those polls. And to share that with you, you'll see that we have 59% of organizations are testing their BCP at least once a year, which is a good sign. And we do have those organizations that are testing at least 21%, or at least 21% are testing at least twice a year, which is really, really good. I encourage that type of testing. And of course, we want to stay compliant, and so we want to test at least once a year there too. Okay. So going back and talking more about testing, a business continuity plan only works if it's tested and if people actually know what's in it. Testing is how you find the holes before a real disruption finds them for you. It can be as simple as a tabletop exercise where you talk through a what if scenario over coffee, or a full-blown recovery drill where you pretend the network is down and everyone's scrambling for real. Either way, testing shows you what's working, what's missing, and what needs to change. Testing also makes the plan feel real. When people have practiced their roles, even just once, they're faster, calmer, and way less likely to freeze up when things go sideways. Ownership is just as important. Every part of your plan needs a clear owner, someone responsible for keeping it up to date and ready to go. Without ownership, the plan gathers dust, people leave, systems change, and suddenly your current plan is 3 organizations out of date. The best BCPs are living documents. Regular testing and clear ownership are what keep your plan ready for whatever comes next. And this takes us to our next poll question. I have a lot of questions today, so bear with me. But our question here is, when was the last time your organization updated its BCP? The last question was about testing. Now we're talking about actually updating the BCP. Our answer options are within the last 6 months, 6 to 12 months ago, over a year ago, not sure. Very interesting. And we're about 75% voted. So I think we're good to close those polls and share the results with you. So we're looking at 53% have tested or updated the BCP within the last 6 months. And then we're also seeing that 32% have updated it about 6 to 12 months ago. And so I wonder if this is dependent upon if something's changed within your organization, like your business processes, or there has been an update with emerging technologies and things like that. And so taking a look at your BCP and updating it is very important. And I just want to say thank you so much for answering. Whether your plan was updated recently or it's been a while, you're definitely not alone. A lot of organizations have great intentions when it comes to business continuity, but the reality is things slip through the cracks. So this brings us to the next part of our presentation, common pitfalls. These are the most frequent issues we see when BCPs don't quite work as expected. Knowing what to watch out for can make the difference between a plan that sits on a shelf and one that actually helps in a crisis. Let's take a look. Even with the best intentions, like I said earlier, a lot of business continuity plans stumble, and usually for the same reasons. One of the biggest issues we're seeing is the plan exists, but no one is using it. It's sitting in a binder, or worse, lost in a folder labeled miscellaneous on someone's desktop, untested, unread, and forgotten until a real emergency hits. Another pitfall is making the plan too generic. A one-size-fits-all plan sounds great until you realize you can't generic your way through a ransomware attack. Your plan needs to be specific to your team, your systems, and your risks. Lack of ownership is another common trap. When no one's responsible for updating the plan, it quickly gets stale, and stale plans cause mistakes at the worst possible times. And finally, overlooking third-party dependencies is a classic. If a vendor you rely on goes down and you haven't planned for it, you might feel the impact just as much as if your own system failed. The good news, these problems are preventable. When a BCP is specific, tested, and assigned to be to the right people, it becomes more than a document. It becomes a tool your organization can actually rely on. And this takes us to our very last poll question for today. And our question here is, what is your biggest challenge with BCP right now? Our answer options are identifying critical processes, mapping systems system dependencies, testing and exercising the plan, keeping the plan updated, or getting buy-in from leadership. And I think you should be seeing the poll right now. I can't tell. There you go. Yeah, we're seeing it's pretty even with these options. Okay, we can go ahead and close those polls and share the results. So you can see everything, it's pretty even within the mapping systems dependencies, testing and exercising the plan, and keeping the plan updated. And those are very big areas in the BCP and also very important areas. I just want to say thank you for sharing your biggest challenges. It's clear that while many of us are thinking about BCP, we're all facing different hurdles when it comes to putting those plans into action. So to dig deeper into some of those real world challenges and how organizations are working through them, I'm excited to kick off our panel discussion. We've got two fantastic guests who bring both internal and consulting perspectives on BCP. And I think you're going to get a lot out of what they have to share. And while we're discussing and talking to our panelists, make sure you submit your questions and we can get to them. Okay, so this is Joseph Ellis, and Joseph, you can go ahead and turn on your camera and your mic. But Joseph is a man of many talents and interests, from healthcare to real estate to IT audits. But what ties it all together is his passion for using technology to solve real world problems. Today, he's a consultant with Boost, where he helps organize, build, and maintain strong information security programs. One of his focus areas is business continuity plan. So I'm excited for him to share his perspective with us today. Hi, Joseph. I'm going to move you to a screen that I can actually see you on. How are you today?
Oh, pretty good.
Good. Awesome. I'm super excited for this. When we were having some of these discussions, I always love learning from you. And so I really think that this is going to be so beneficial for our audience today. And I want to kick us off with our first question here. And the question is, what's the first thing we should focus on when creating a BCP?
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me so often working with our clients, especially after perhaps they have already developed a BCP, maybe with some other system or some other platform, or maybe a predecessor had created a BCP and now somebody new is coming in and adopting that plan. One of the first things we run into is that the BCP needs to be usable. It needs to be meaningful. So often we run into situations where either the BCP is very outdated and doesn't mean anything anymore. It was last looked at or updated 18 years ago. And the person who made it is long gone, and we don't know anything about any of that information anymore. That's a common pitfall. Another one is that in an effort to avoid getting beat up by auditors and examiners, you put in all the information that exists in the universe, and your BCP ends up being 800 pages long, 3,000 pages long, and it is equally unusable, not meaningful. So first and foremost, we desire to create a business continuity plan that is indeed accurate, up to date, and above all, usable. It needs to be something that you actually can reach for and make use of in the event of an emergency.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's whenever your employees are trying to get something going during a disruption, it can be very complicated and very hard for them to find the right resources, especially if your BCP is too long, or if it's too technical, or if it's too complicated. And so I completely agree. Making sure that your BCP is usable for your employees is so important. Great advice. Okay, so our next question is, how do you decide which business processes are critical? I think this is a really interesting question.
Well, my joke is just flip a coin, just see what happens.
Yeah.
But no, that's ridiculous, of course. There are different ways to do that. One thing that we caution against is asking the owners of the business processes simply, how critical is this business process? Because that's their baby, that's their job, that's their department. A lot of times it's going to be difficult for somebody to say, well, I wouldn't say my department or my job or my function is critical to the survival of our organization. Maybe it's a couple of notches down. That's going to be kind of a rare response. So we take the approach of at least a more objective process where we assess the impact to your organization if a given business process is down or disrupted or broken or something. And we approach it from 4 different angles. And we say, if this business process were down, how would this affect you financially? How would this affect you reputationally? How would this affect your ability to conduct daily business? And that would be a huge monumental effect, or no, that really wouldn't hurt us in the first 24 hours, the first 72 hours, maybe 30 days in, yeah, that's going to start to hurt. We walk through that process. Mm-hmm. And that is at least a more objective, it's not purely objective, but at least it's a little bit more objective way to assess whether, if this process breaks, we are in deep trouble versus, no, we'll be okay. We'll be okay for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. We'll be all right. So that's the way we do approach it. Ask those sorts of questions piece by piece rather than just sort of a blanket statement. How critical is this thing?
Yeah, and I think just having like open communication with your business process owners too is important to that. Like you want to get those details from them, and they know like you said, it's their baby. So they are going to understand what processes and dependencies are a part of that process. And so having that open communication and setting those clear goals can really help establish what is critical for your organization. What's the goal here? So yeah, very cool. All right. If you have, did you have anything else to say? I didn't know if I cut you off, Joseph.
Oh, no, you're fine. I always have more to say, but somebody better cut me off or I'll just keep going.
No, I love it. Please say more. But well, okay, I'll take you to our next question here. What is the biggest mistake organizations make with their BCP? What have you seen?
So what I said earlier about the BCP being usable, that's right up there at the top of the list, making sure the BCP is usable. Another mistake that we often see, which you've already alluded to, is the idea of testing or exercising your BCP, making sure that it actually is meaningful. It's one thing to sort of hypothesize and sort of wonder about what we might do in a given situation. It's another to actually sit down, set aside some time, get your team together, get your people together, to walk through a disruption, either completely pretending or in fact turning things off, seeing what it would be like to not have connectivity to one of your systems or one of your vendors. Arrange with one of your vendors to cease service for an hour or 2 and see how your people respond. We've actually done that with some of our clients, to include fire drills and building evacuations, severing connection with their core provider. Yeah. Those are very invasive, very disruptive types of tests, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that, but do test your system, do test your plan, test your people, see how they handle things, see whether they in fact do reach for the business continuity plan, or do they just kind of wing it and just try to kind of figure it out as they go. All those sorts of questions need to be answered. We're also seeing more emphasis from, of course, these things change over time and the landscape changes over time. In the past couple of years especially, we've been seeing a little bit more pressure from examiners to test your BCP more than once a year. It used to be that, hey, if you did your one tabletop for the year, you're fine, we'll move on. They're starting to kind of push against that a little bit and starting to say, we really want to see you test every area of your organization, all your departments, all your business processes. They need to have some sort of a test, some sort of a stress test to see how they do. And so that's going to necessitate more than one test per year. So if you're not already testing once a year, of course, get on that, start doing that. If you're comfortable testing once a year, I would encourage you to ramp it up to twice a year, or perhaps even quarterly if you want to be really ambitious. That can help resolve that issue as well.
Yeah, and so that brings up maybe there's some concern out there with like how much resources they have to be able to do these types of tests and how often. And so if you're doing like a full-blown exercise or a full-blown test, how long does that usually take to plan something like that? I guess it just depends, but
yeah, it depends. I mean, that's our catch-all answer for
yeah.
industry. Yeah, it depends. There are tons and tons of resources out there available to help you in this effort. The Tandem software itself has a number of testing scenarios that are right there in the software. You just go to that page and there's a good number of various kinds of scenarios for BCP testing. There's also tons and tons of resources out there on the internet from various firms and various companies, and also regulatory entities. And government entities, NIST and CISA and organizations like that. They have lots of resources available, some of which are already reflected in Tandem, and some of which are additional ones you can find out there. So planning can be as quick as finding a scenario and walking through it with your team. You know, just kind of stumbling and bumbling through it. None of us are perfect. Let's talk through this and see what we learn. Other more elaborate, more invasive, more disruptive type tests, of course, you can spend months planning, you know, a big event like that.
Yeah.
So it'll vary. It depends on your resources and your time and your people, of course, as with everything else.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Great answer. So I do have a couple of more questions here for you. What's changed the most in how we think about BCP over the last few years?
I think, again, as the landscape changes, as industry changes, as expectations from our regulators change, we have been seeing the BCP becoming a more important element in our information security programs. Again, over time, when we first started developing information security programs, they were relatively simple. You just needed kind of one risk assessment. You kind of needed to make sure that your data was stored safely, and you kind of needed to make sure that you had some backup power in case the electricity goes out. Of course, over time, threat landscapes change, the complexity of our network environments change. We're outsourcing more than ever, which is great, that's fine. But because of those changes, everything gets more detailed, more complicated, more convoluted. And sometimes our BCPs don't keep up. Again, we've got that 18-year-old document sitting in a closet somewhere that nobody's ever looked at. That's something that really has changed and needs to change. Your BCP needs to be a meaningful, usable, I know I keep harping on that, sort of a living document, something that it doesn't need to be at the top of your mind every single day, but it needs to be something that you remember is there. I liken it to the fire extinguishers that we have bolted on the wall around the building. You see them sitting there, and you see them for so long and so much that you start forgetting that they're there. Yeah. And when you actually need a fire extinguisher, you can't remember where that thing is, even though you've been looking at it every day for the last 9 years. Yeah. It's kind of the same for the BCP. We need to keep it fresh, keep it alive, keep it updated, make sure that we can indeed rely on it when we need it.
Sure. And if you forget where the fire extinguishers are in your building, then you can just put it in your BCP so you know where to locate them.
Right. Place the Tandem for that.
Yeah. So I saw a customer question come in, and I think it kind of it's kind of about this topic that we're on. And the question is, how would you recommend balancing business continuity planning between information security and compliance?
Well, it's part of the puzzle. It's part of the pie.
Yeah.
To me personally, I tend to be more of kind of a prepper kind of a person, make sure we have everything that we need just in case something goes wrong, big storm comes in, power goes out, any sort of thing like that. So for me personally, I think a BCP it's right up there at the top amongst our risk assessments and our policies and all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
There are other pieces of an information security program that maybe they're, I don't want to say least important and just throw them in the back of the closet and forget about them forever, but of course, there are some that are lower priority. And I would say that the BCP, conversely, it needs to be up there at the top, because if there's an emergency, when there's an emergency, and you need to stop the bleeding, that BCP document is going to be your first aid kit that you reach for. That's going to be the thing that shows you what to do. Now, speaking to you in the audience, you attendees, you may be the BCP expert in your organization. You may be very familiar with it. I would so very strongly encourage you to consider what your BCP looks like and how it reads from other people's perspectives, from a non-expert, somebody who might have to fill in if you're not there when the emergency happens. So your question, kind of where does this fit amongst the rest of our information security program? It's right up there at the top. It needs to be in its proper place and have the right attention put on it.
Yeah, for sure. And there was another customer question that came in, and you might have answered this question, but maybe we can like simplify it a little bit. But how are the information security program, or information security in general, and BCP related?
Yeah, maybe I kind of touched on that, but maybe we can try to readdress that or clarify that, how they're related. On the surface, it does seem like they're kind of not related. It's kind of like, our information security has to do with encryption and authentication and multi-factor and all that kind of stuff, whereas BCP is, a tornado hit our building. Mm-hmm. But when a tornado hits your building, or when your power goes out, this speaks to serving your customers. Ultimately, this comes down to serving your customers and staying in business. That's what business continuity is. It's a business continuity plan. And the service that we provide, financial institutions, the services that you provide to your customers, to your members, is part of critical infrastructure. This is a serious issue that impacts lots and lots and lots of people around our community, both in terms of moving dollars around, but also in terms of keeping their information safe. That's the whole point behind GLBA, was keeping information safe. And when a tornado strikes your building, or your power goes out, or you've lost connection to your core provider, suddenly information security becomes a big issue. Are we losing information? Did somebody get into our system? Are we spilling information out there into the world somehow, some way, either physically or electronically? So they do go hand in hand, very much so. That's why your IT auditors, when they come to conduct your IT audit, they hopefully they ask you about your BCP. Do you have a plan to stay in business, to continue operations in the event of a disruption? They do go hand in hand, very much so.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for explaining that. I think that was really helpful. Now I want to address this question that just came in, and it's about testing. And the question is, if you are outsourced, can you consider the testing the vendor does as a bank test?
Yes.
Perfect, easy. Let's wrap up.
The shortest answer I've ever made in my entire life. But yes, absolutely. I would count that as a test. I would document it. Again, of course, we are very Tandem oriented. Within Tandem, there's a place where you can document all your exercises and tests, even if they are conducted by a vendor. When they send you that report that says we conducted such and such test and here are the results, yeah, document that. That is a test of continuity. That's going to affect your ability to stay in business and continue to serve your customers. I would not use that as a sole substitute for you conducting your own tests and exercises. I would say, yep, that counts as a test. You also conduct your own internally as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I have just one more question, and then we can wrap up and I can bring Chris on. What's one key takeaway or piece of advice you would like to leave with the audience when it comes to business continuity planning?
Well, if I can split it into two pieces and also repeat what I've already said, make your BCP meaningful, usable, and test it. Make sure that it actually works. It's kind of analogous to our data backups. Make sure that you're backing up your data and test that you can actually recover that backed up data. It's the same idea. Make sure you've got a good plan in place. Make sure you've tested it and proven it to be usable and meaningful.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you and again, taking the time to spend with us. All right, I'll see you around.
All right.
All right, so going on to our next presenter, and Chris, I am inviting you to turn on your camera and to turn on your mic. So let me move my, hi Chris, how's it going?
Hello.
Let me introduce you really quick. Sorry, 1 second. So Chris Brewer has been with CoNetrix since his intern days at Texas Tech University and now plays a key role as the network administrator for CoNetrix. He has been hands-on with just about every tech development we've done since 2005, and like a true IT professional, he has a strong, healthy dislike for printers. We're so glad to have him here today to share his expertise. I just love that line. It's so funny, and I feel that. I feel that for you. All right, let me click on my presentation here. Okay. So Chris, I am again so excited to have you here. I've enjoyed talking to you about what we wanted to talk about during this presentation. I think you have a lot of really good things to share. So I will jump into our first question if you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right. So how do you determine the recovery time objective, the RTO, and the recovery point objective for critical systems?
So I'm going to use Joseph's joke here and say flip a coin.
Yeah.
There's some truth to that, but when it comes down to it, I think the two struggles that you run into is one, making sure that everything is realistic, making sure that you can recover to a specific point within a specific time, but also making sure that this is going to be good for your business, that you don't want to say, my recovery point objective is a month ago or a year ago, because all of that data is important to you. That's why this is a disaster. That's why this is a disruption. That's why you're having to go back and recover that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think kind of the easiest way to start out is saying, okay, maybe we just start with a standard day, 24-hour recovery point, 24-hour recovery time, and then we adjust from there. That if certain applications are more critical, those are going to be at the front of the line. Maybe those are the ones that have the higher recovery, or I should say the lower recovery time, the one that we're going to try and get back online quickly. Maybe the ones that are less critical, okay, we can sit on that a little bit and move it to the back of the line for the disruption. But in any case, it really depends on the application that you're trying to bring back. The system, the environment, whatever that ends up looking like for your business, for your network, in order to make sure that everything comes online as quickly as you can, but realistically as you can.
Sure. I love that you said realistically. I think we forget sometimes that, again, we're just trying to add this information, maybe just to stay compliant, or to have it documented somewhere. But it's in guidance that it needs to be realistic. We need to make sure that these things are something that is real to our risks and to our team. And so understanding those systems and having that open communication with your IT department especially is so important. And it's important to know that RPO as a playbook for you guys. So yeah, thank you for answering that question. All right, so this leads us into our next question. What's your approach to testing systems restoration? How often should they be done and by whom?
Again, I think a lot of this really depends on what system that you're trying to test. And so I'm thinking for things like backups are probably the easiest thing to test. They're also probably the ones that are most easily forgotten, because a lot of the backup solutions nowadays, you can just set it, forget it, and well, as long as the email comes in green, everything seems to be fine. But it is important to go back and actually test those backups to make sure that you can actually recover the data. Internally, I test our backups once a month. I want to make sure that I can recover it. And that may just be recovering a single file. It may be restoring the entire machine. Whatever that ends up looking like, I want to make sure that my backups are good to go. Similarly, with any of these other disruptions that you want to test on, it depends on the scale. It depends on what you're trying to test. If you're wanting to test the process and make sure that everything is good, maybe that does look like a full DR test. Maybe that looks like a full testing of the incident. Maybe it's something more simple than that. Maybe you actually do a tabletop and sit with all the stakeholders and run through the process hypothetically to make sure that everything is working like you expect it to. Any of those really seem to work well to make sure that you can discover those holes that you mentioned earlier, the holes in your BCP, before the real thing actually happens.
Yeah, and so what does that look like for, and I asked Joseph this when we were talking about testing too, but what does that look like for planning? Like is there, I guess it depends on what you're testing, but what are those resources look like? How many people are having to test with you when you're testing those backups? Is it just you? What does that look like on your end, and the resources that you have to use to plan for these types of testing?
Yeah, for something simple like testing a backup, that one really is me most of the time, because I just want to make sure that the process is working. You can certainly go through, and if you've got an IT team a support team that's going through that process, maybe rotate it out so that it's not just one person gatekeeping the process. It's not one person that is the only one that knows the steps to take. Make sure that it's documented. If it's something where you're testing a full disruption, a full incident, then at the very least, you're going to need all the stakeholders involved that are going to be a part of that incident. I think back to a tabletop exam that I was a part of recently, where we're talking about a fire in the building. So in that case, we had people there from IT, we had operations, we had our leadership that were involved in that meeting, and each person had a role to play, whether it was in terms of, okay, how do we get our people out of the building? How are we making sure that everybody is accounted for? But also, okay, how do we bring systems back up? How do we recover them? And so looking at it from multiple angles and multiple departments was very important to make sure that we had the entire process figured out.
Yeah, and so as the network administrator, if you're going through these exercises and testing your systems, what happens if there was a human error during the testing scenario, or if something were to come up? How do you report that, or what are your actions that you're taking during those times?
A lot of that is probably just from the lessons learned.
Yeah.
If something were to happen during a real incident, real disruption that's going down, and you have to pivot all of a sudden, documenting that after the fact, talking about it, making sure that we know what happened, why it happened, and how we can recover from it is certainly important. Those documentation updates, whether it's directly to the BCP, to the checklist, to any of the guidance that you may end up having, that helps you the next time that something may happen, so that you don't run into that same issue again.
Mm. Yeah, no, and this actually leads us to this next question that I had for you. How do you handle documentation for system recovery steps, and what advice would you give to someone trying to improve that process?
So I'm going to answer that with another example.
Perfect.
One
Love it.
of my disruption examples that I love to share is about a power outage, because that is probably one of the more disruptive incidents that is least long-term damaging. It's one of the ones that can happen to anybody. The power goes out, you lose all your systems, nobody can work. How do you bring everything back online? When the first time that I had to deal with a power outage, after it was over, during my lessons learned, trying to document what happened and figure out how to recover from it, I wrote a checklist. And it was a fairly comprehensive checklist of saying, these are the steps I go through to shut everything down. These are the steps I go through to turn it all back on. And then I even took it a step further and I created a appendix, a short version. We have lost power. What is the quickest way I can turn everything off? And then that quick version is actually in our server room. It is taped to the wall so that anybody that's going to be involved with that could easily see those steps. It's going to be quickly accessible so that we can take action and do everything that we need to. Then, anytime we have a power outage, I can go back to that documentation and just update the checklist. If I run into things that I didn't think about since the last time, or if things have changed, I can easily go back and update that checklist, throw it back into Tandem, and now I've got an updated checklist in case we run into a power outage again.
Yeah. Wow, that is so, like you're kind of having to be creative there, right? Like you could just throw it in a manual and just like hope that someone finds it and figures it out, but you are thinking creatively into making sure that it's there, so it should be easily accessible to everyone that's working with this, and that's a really, really good idea. I love that. I do want to get to at least one customer question here that I'm seeing, and the question is it correct to say RPO deals with the frequency of backup, and that hosted cloud-based services and data would not require an RPO, considering that is one out of our control and almost always continually backed up? Did that make sense? That was a really long question.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of questions in that. So I can certainly see where recovery point objective deals directly with backups.
Yeah.
As many backups as you take, with every single backup is a recovery point that you could potentially restore to. So if your recovery point objective is 24 hours, you're probably taking nightly backups, and they're happening once a day. Now, in terms of a cloud service, if it is managed by a cloud vendor, if this is not something that I'm personally dealing with, then yes, I have to rely on their backup processes. That's part of the due diligence of making sure that they're taking care of my data and protecting my data like I want them to. I would say that they still have an RPO. You may not necessarily know what that is up front because this is part of their service that they're providing, but they do have their RPO. And that helps. If they were to have an incident, that helps you determine when you can recover from that and how much data you could potentially lose. So knowing that RPO is still very important to keep track of, even on a cloud service that you're not directly responsible for.
Yeah, that's great. And then there is another customer question that I want to get to. So this question is, who's responsible for the validation of the recovered data?
So I'm guessing this is validation of recovered data from like maybe a backup or store test.
Yeah, I would assume so.
I think part of that, it depends on the extent of the recovery test. If it is just a standard, regularly scheduled test like I do monthly, then I, as the recovery person, as the IT guy, as the network administrator, I'm the one that's going to be responsible for making sure that I have been able to recover that file. I've documented it, documented the recovery as a test. If this is something for a different department, a different division, maybe it's a full system restore as a part of those tests, then I would say whoever the stakeholder is for that service in making sure that, well, let's say if I'm restoring a server, whoever's responsible for that application to make sure that that application is working. I can make sure the server boots, but I may not necessarily have access rights to that application to make sure that it's working correctly. So at that point, I'm going to involve the stakeholder to make sure that they can recover their data.
Yeah, very interesting. And before we wrap up with you, Chris, I do want to ask you, what's one key takeaway or piece of advice you would like to leave with the audience when it comes to business continuity planning?
Joseph stole my thunder with testing. I think testing is certainly very important. So I'm going to sidetrack here a second and say, in the event of an incident, if it is a major incident like a power outage or something where you're looking at this as maybe a disaster, I think the hardest thing that we can do is have patience. It is going to take a while. You can meet those RPOs and RTOs, but everybody is going to be trying to get this done as quickly as possible, and it's not going to happen that way. It will happen fast, but not as quickly as you think it should. And so having that patience is one of the most difficult things, whether you're the one that's actually doing the recovery or you're the one watching the recovery happen. And that patience is very important.
Wow, that's really good advice. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate your time with us today. It was just a pleasure talking with you, and I will see you around.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so now that we've talked about the why of business continuity, if you can just stick with me, we just have a few more minutes, but I want to take a few minutes to show you the how, what it looks like to actually build and maintain your BCP inside Tandem. So let me get that up for everyone. Oh, and I forgot to do that. Let me sign in really quick. I don't want to show you guys my password. Okay, let's get that up. We'll say no thanks to that. So this is the Tandem business continuity plan. Right now, I am in the main section of the business continuity plan where you'll list all of your information about business continuity. And I want to take you to our pre-built template business processes where these are most common business processes that we see for organizations, but you can always come in and customize or include your own business process. And just clicking this edit icon next to this business process. In the general section, this is where you're going to be able to list your responsibility. You know, who are your business process owners? Who's in charge of keeping this up to date? Who knows the ins and outs of this business process? You can leave your or document your responsibility for this business process here. Then I want to take us down to the business impact analysis. So the business impact analysis will help you determine your criticality and your MTD for your business process. We do have this nice little potential impacts graph to give you a visual of what that criticality can look like. And we're looking at this business process within different categories that could impact your organization during a disruption. So if we're looking at, say, if this business process was down, what is my financial loss for this disruption? And so you can see here that you can include what that loss will look like and how long it will, and how long you can have this business process down before it actually starts causing these types of losses. And then we can identify that criticality here in the business impact analysis section. Then we'll hop down over to the recovery section. This is where you'll list your recovery objectives and have them listed here along with that recovery time objective, so that RTO. Remember, just keep in mind that your RTO should be within your MTD, and if you wanted a reminder of what that MTD is, you can see that right here. Then we have our dependencies. So you'll be able to list the business processes that are required for this, the staff required, third-party services required, but I wanted to spend a little time on the systems and equipment required section. When you're listing your dependencies here for this specific section, it's going to look a little bit different because you're wanting to identify if this system is going to be the first thing you need there for that first recovery objective. And then you can also identify your RPO, the recovery point objective there. Further down in this business process, you can see other software that could be required, supplies required, and any instructions and manuals that you would like to add for this business process. Going out of there, there's a lot in the business continuity plan, but I want to skip down to the systems and equipment recovery so you can kind of see what the recovery plan will look like for our systems. If I go into this backup system, we can scroll down and we have our own recovery section for this system. We can set responsibility, but we'll also want to identify the criticality for the system. Once you identify the criticality, the MTD will appear here, and it's important to know what business processes are dependent upon this system. You can click on the view details here to see which business processes those are and the criticality level. And based on those RPOs of what you have set up, you'll want to establish that frequency for the backup profile. Now, if this is a critical system, we do have a place for recovery details. You're going to add a lot more information in this section here, like who the data process owner is, the third-party services that are required, and so on. But we also have a place for restoration checklists. This is something that Chris was just talking about his power outage situation. You can add those restoration checklists here and the verification of operation. And I definitely want to show you the exercise and tests page. And like Joseph mentioned earlier, Tandem does provide a lot of scenarios for you to help get you started and to kind of guide you through a test. And if we were to open up this BCP training test, you can see what type of method that you would like to select for the test, if it's full scale, limited scale, tabletop exercise, or test. And then we also provide some information that, again, to help get you started, to kind of walk you through this scenario. Then we have a place where you can schedule out these tests. So if you have multiple tests that you need to get through the year, or if you're doing it quarterly, monthly, however, then you can set that date and set up who is responsible for running the test, and then also send out reminder notifications so they don't forget and they can prepare for it. We can also say, the business processes that you have listed in the BCP, we can associate those business processes, emergency checklists, and so on to this test so we know that it's going to be a part of it. And then lastly, you have your results and analysis section where you'll come back and put that information after the test. 2 more pages I just wanted to show you. We do have a reports page for the BCP to let you know what information is missing within the BCP. A very, very helpful resource is this BCP gap analysis Excel spreadsheet, where I have it pulled up here, where it'll list your business processes. It will show you the business process criticality level, the MTD, and the RTO. And if we scroll down, we can start seeing that it's highlighting those gaps between the MTD and RTO, just so that you're aware that there is a gap here. We can go back and take a look at that business process and the MTD and RTO and see where that gap is. And then in the second tab, we also have a gap analysis for systems and equipment RPO, where we're taking a look at the backup frequency and the RPO listed for that system. And the last page I wanted to show you and share is the download documents page. So you're probably wondering, okay, this is all great information that I have in Tandem. How do I present this? How do I show it to our auditors and to our board members? Well, this download documents page will help you with that. You can download your full BCP plan, your full BCP here on the download documents page in a Word document or a PDF. And you can also create custom documents. The custom documents are so helpful if you're trying to look at very specific information. If you're wanting just to see your business processes or the BIAs, then you can create custom documents for that. And I do have a document that I can share with you guys. This is our full BCP. We like to call this our presentation ready reports, where it will show you our cover page with your logo and with your organization name. But if we take a look at this category here, business process by impact category, we can see what we've been working on through this, and it'll list that. And then we can also access things like the emergency checklist if you're wanting to take a look at what those step-by-step instructions are for emergencies, and even see our scheduled and completed exercise and tests. And there's a lot more on this document that you can see here. Okay, So that was a brief demo of Tandem Business Continuity Plan. And if you're interested in knowing more about our product, feel free to leave that in the survey at the end of this presentation. And thank you so much for bearing with me. I love the BCP, and I think it's very helpful, and I was excited to show that to you guys today. Okay, so now it's time to wrap things up. Make sure to fill out the survey for a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. And I do have the submit your questions page, but we are over time, but I will be reaching out to you after this webinar if there is questions I didn't get to answer. And with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.